Many weapon states are currently pursuing extensive modernization and expansion programs that will really, for the first time since the end of the Cold War, and essentially providing the infrastructure that could last until 2100. There's now talk in Washington that the U.S. nuclear arsenal will have to increase also in order to match the arsenals of Russia and China combined. So in many ways, we're setting ourselves up for a three-way arms race, which is unprecedented and quite concerning. So the picture is quite bleak on the nuclear side this year.
The picture's quite bleak. The picture's quite bleak because why? Because all of you nuclear scientists are taking jobs with the government to build nuclear weapons in all these countries. I mean, why is it bleak? Because our climate is collapsing, because we are, what is it? The Cold War never ended, because we are, the world is run by omnicidal, psychopathic lunatics? Maybe?
And make more resilient our military infrastructure from the phenomenon of climate risks. Now, this program is focusing mostly on the risks to the nuclear weapons infrastructure, but you can think of all sorts of risks to energy, the energy infrastructure, civilian infrastructure, military bases, housing, every dimension of how we operate and have a ready force is affected by the changing climate. Commission on Nuclear Energy and Climate Security, composed of leaders across key sectors. I chair this along with Dan Poneman, the former Deputy Secretary of Energy, including military leaders, labor, environmental leaders, and many across all dimensions, the National Nuclear Security Administration, who at one of our convenings a few months ago said humankind faces two existential threats for the first time in modern history. One is climate change, and the other, a holdover from the last century that isn't going away, is nuclear weapons. But at COP28, there was a commitment to triple renewable energy, wind and solar, and also to triple nuclear energy by 2050. So,
okay. Triple nuclear energy by 2050. Remember that. She is, she's been involved in energy, Sherry Goodman, for a very long time. And I couldn't play the whole clip because it would have been way too long. So I cherry picked a bit, but you get the idea.
Both those commitments are essential if we're going to have any hope of sort of meeting our goals for a decarbonized future and coming maybe even close to the 2 degrees mark. I think it's inevitable that we will pass 1.5. So then there's the role of the United States in that. And our view is that the U.S. must assume a global leadership role on nuclear energy to ensure both that we can meet a decarbonized future and that the highest standards of safety, security, and non-proliferation are met. So how do we grow? How do we increase capacity for nuclear energy with advanced nuclear reactors, small modular reactors, new safety technologies, and at the same time meet the Sustainable Development Goals and move toward our shared net zero 2050 goals, while meeting increasing energy requirements.
You hear her? How do we meet the goals where climate change and nuclear meet? And it's all about...
And that civil nuclear energy is an important part of that mix. Advanced nuclear technologies such as small modular reactors can help make this transition to a green economy with greater diversification and reliability in energy sources.
It's all about growth. I watched this whole video. It was from 6 days ago. And our perfectly wonderful Obsolete Optics Brett, he made some great points to what she said, to the whole thing, which if It'll be in the show notes. You really have to listen to this. 3 points. Sustainable development is an oxymoron. I mean, he did this better than I could have ever done it. And believe me, I was going to, and I stumbled into this. We cannot have infinite growth on a finite planet with finite resources subject to immutable laws of biology, ecology, chemistry, physics, and thermodynamics. We do not need more economic growth, especially when we cannot afford it. We need immediate and earnest degrowth and rewilding. Quote, growth for the sake of growth is the ideology of the cancer cell, unquote. Edward Abbey. I've used that before, actually. Not only are nuclear arms vulnerable to climate change, but so are nuclear energy facilities, as evident in France during the 2 most recent summers, where rivers used for cooling water dried up or were too hot, forcing power plants to reduce output or shut down completely. Coastal nuclear power stations are also vulnerable, not only to earthquakes and tsunamis, as evident by the ongoing Fukushima Daiichi atomic disaster, but also to rising sea levels and increasing ocean temperatures. When the water gets too hot, it loses its ability to cool the reactors effectively. 3. I can't believe this needs explaining, but imagine thinking that splitting the atom to boil water will somehow cool the planet and stop or slow the rate of climate change. Also, the water vapor from those cooling towers and heat exchangers is one of the most potent greenhouse gases, but nobody mentions that because we have carbon dioxide tunnel vision. We ignore all the other signs of ecological overshoot and habitat destruction driving the remaining web of life to extinction. Remember, civilization is a heat engine, regardless of how it's powered. Then he goes on, 3 questions. As we all ought to know already, the production of cement, concrete, and steel are some of the most carbon-intensive processes in which humans engage. So my first question is this: what are we doing to address this issue, and how are these sectors being decarbonized? 2. Uranium ore mining, milling, concentration, refining, conversion, enrichment, and fuel pellet production are some of the most highly toxic and environmentally damaging processes. Mining destroys habitat for wildlife, leaving highly toxic and environmentally damaging mine tailings behind. Uranium refining creates highly toxic waste as well. As with mining and milling, the primary risks associated with conversion are more chemical than radiological. Converting uranium ore concentrate, which is uranium oxide powder, to UF6 involves several volatile and soluble chemicals, including fluorine, hydrofluoric acid, and uranyl fluoride? These chemical forms contribute to risks associated with inhalation if a release occurs. In addition, the conversion process uses hydrogen gas, a gas that is flammable and could create an explosion hazard. So my question is this: how are the new fuels going to address these and other issues related to fuel production now and in the future? 3. We still have no way to address the spent fuel waste. Currently, spent fuel rods sit in pools of borated water on site until they can be placed into dry cask storage, where the casks continue to sit on site, exposed to the elements. As far as I know, we have no deep geologic repositories besides WIPP in New Mexico and Onkalo in Finland. So aside from constructing more reprocessing facilities, feeding spent fuel to fast neutron breeder reactors, and opening up Yucca Mountain, what are we doing to address the issue of nuclear waste? Thank you for your time. He's wonderful. They had a virtual discussion on what climate change means for nuclear security. You should watch this. covering topics like how climate change acts as a threat multiplier, what policymakers think of the issue, mitigate the impacts from new threats in a world in increasingly complicated reality.